So here are some Ficus Bonsai cuttings that I had taken off a shrub actually and planted. Right now I think I got about 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that rooted. I'm going to be reducing the size of these ficus cuttings today. Before I do, I want to point out an issue with these leaves right here. As you can see, these leaves are kind of folded and even have some markings on them. This is usually indicative of an insect actually getting inside the leaf. So as you can see with this leaf, there are little egg sacs in there. They're going to hatch and eventually the insects will come out and eat or kill the leaf. This leaf here, as you can see, is a little bit further progressed. The insects have actually hatched, and as you can see, the leaf is growing brown spots. On this third leaf, the insects have actually matured. You can see them moving around in there. And you really got to get rid of these because these are going to be, well, you want to get rid of any of them, but they're going to spread and cause more problems for the plant. So I'll be removing these leaves. So I really took off a lot of leaves and branches. Pretty much any branch that had these infected leaves I removed, which kind of helped me shrink down the tree. As you can see, they're a little bit smaller, but you really don't want to mess with any kind of parasite. So now that I've removed all the infected leaves, I'm going to start making some bigger cuts to the tree. Right now I'm trying to decide what I want to do with this one here. If I cut back to this or this branch, it's going to leave the trunk really long and straight. As much as I would love to keep the ramification, the branches and all the leaves, I think leaving this long, straight, boring piece of branch will ultimately detract from the final product. I think a lot of new bonsai growers, you know, they get really excited about all the branches and leaves, and they kind of forget that at the end of the day, you know, the trunk is the most significant part of the tree, and branches will eventually grow back. I think a lot of new bonsai growers are also afraid of killing their trees. They're afraid to cut off the leaves because, of course, that's where the tree's going to get its energy from. But I've been doing this for a little bit, and granted, I'm still a beginner, but I've definitely at least gotten confident enough to know some of my plants and know the weather down here in South Florida. And if I make a big cut, I'm pretty confident these trees are established enough that they'll put out enough new branches to survive. So I'm going to go and make a cut right about here where the taper of this part of the trunk starts to kind of minimize and become too long and straight. So now I'm left with the base trunk, which I'm hoping is going to, I'm pretty sure will put out new leaves. And now I also have this new cutting, which already has some good branch structure, which hopefully I can now root, and I'll end up getting 2 trees. This next tree here has a really long straight trunk, and then this spot where I'd cut it, where it kind of grew out to the side and then straight up. So there's a few options I could do with this tree. I could cut it back real low like I did with the last one. My second option is wiring this tree to put some good bend into this trunk, make it a little more interesting. My third option is to actually kind of leave it as it is. Although it looks kind of boring, it is interesting. It kind of, the story this tree will tell if I don't end up doing much with the trunk is that, you know, there was a tall tree, and for some reason it got either hit by a rock, broken in a storm, and then had to regrow the best it could. And I kind of want to, I think I kind of want to hold on to that story of that formal upright tree that got broke and is doing its best to kind of correct itself and maintain its upright position. So I think I'm going to go along with that theme for now and make a. So my branch selection is going to be up here between these 2 main trunks. There's not much taper in this back branch. This is the main trunk line right now. I think I'm going to remove that and let this thinner branch become the new trunk line to build a little bit more taper into the overall tree. So here I'm going to make that cut to make that smaller side branch the new main trunk line. And again, I'll now plant this smaller branch as a cutting, hopefully get another tree. So here's another one of the ficus right here. As you can see, it's got a few branches branching out down here, but the branches are very long and thin. So I think I'm going to reduce these branches down a little bit, make a smaller. When you cut back a tree, you have a few options. You can cut just right to the branch with no leaves or potential branches coming out, and the tree will usually put out a whole bunch of new branches. However, sometimes you can kind of select a new spot of growth. You can see that little dot of green on that branch right above that white dot. That's where the last leaf fell off and a new branch is going to form. So I could cut that branch right to there and a new branch should be put out. So I made some cuts on this small tree. I think I'm actually going to cut the trunk line right down to this branch right here to make that the new lead, and then I'll replant the taller part of the tree as a new cutting. So here goes the cut. And there's the tree, and here's a new potential tree that already has a decent amount of ramification on it, which can make a nice small tree right there. So I got a little bit of rooting hormone in here, and I'm going to dip these small little cuttings that I took of the Ficus benjamina, dip them in the rooting hormone, as so, and then I'm going to plant them into the soil here. Ficus cuttings root really easily. Sometimes you usually don't even need the rooting hormone, but I'm just doing it for these little guys. But you just dip them in, you pop them in the soil, and this might produce some nice tiny little mommy trees in the future. Those tiny cuttings, you know, if they even make it, will just only really be small mommy trees. But these larger cuttings that already have a fair amount of branch structure already can become substantial trees on their own. So these are all the prune trees with the cuttings that I now placed back in the soil, the same pot, simply because I don't have lots of space for different pots. Hopefully once these root, I'll separate them out. Here's some other plants I've been working on. This plant here I've kind of had in training for a few years. It was collected off of a cabbage palm, and I recently made this cut, shortening it down a little bit. Hopefully it's going to put out some more ramification. These longer branches that are sticking out of the soil here were actually all from this original plant, but as I cut them off, I've been rooting them as cuttings, and now I have some new plants growing. Same thing with this short, fat tree here. Initially, this tree was much taller. All these branches were from this tree, but I over time removed the different trunks and shortened it down. This right here is a Schefflera that I've been training for a while. Probably collected this tree probably about 8 years ago off of a cabbage palm. As you can see, the nabari's gotten really nice. It's become a real thick, very thick-based tree. The one issue I've been having with it, though, is getting back budding. The way this tree just tends to grow, they grow huge leaves, unlike the dwarf Schefflera varieties. And for years I've been cutting this back. As you can see, all the different cut marks that I've made over the years. This thing will sometimes grow to be about 6-7 feet tall, and I have to cut it back. And it seems finally, after all these cutbacks, it's starting to put out some new growth. I think I'm getting a new bud right there. Some of these branches that I had cut off are building some buds up, and I noticed a couple other small buds looking like they're forming. So that's really exciting. I'm really hoping that all these buds start to, you know, take off and put out more branching, and I really hope I can build some good ramification to this tree, and I think it'll be a great bonsai then. This is a ficus that I wired probably a couple of years ago. If you notice, I've left the wire on. I'm actually going to let the tree grow around the wire. It's a technique sometimes used by Japanese bonsai masters. Sometimes these Japanese bonsai masters will leave the wires on to add more interest to the tree. So I'm going to let this tree continue to grow, and hopefully it'll cover that entire wire, and we'll get a really interesting twisted trunk pattern. Here's another tree that I'm using that same technique with, where I'm allowing the tree to actually grow around and over the wire. You can see a real nice twisted pattern here, and some of the branches are really starting to get close to covering that wire completely. These look, it's pretty cool. You know, for most trees, I don't know how healthy this would be, but ficus can put out aerial roots, and they're pretty tough. So I'm not really concerned with the wire being on the tree long term really affecting the health of the tree too much. But it's definitely creating an interesting pattern, and it's a cool little experiment to try out. This is a tree that I collected probably about 7 years ago. It was actually a small little branch back then, part of a shrub line at the University of Miami ratskeller. At the time, they were actually knocking down the rat. So I was actually there the very last night at the rat. They were demolishing it. They stayed open late, and some of the shrubs were already being torn up, so I decided to rescue one. I'm really glad I rescued the shrub. It's a great memento from the original rat at the University of Miami. I really wish I had grabbed more, but as you can see, it's really starting to develop a cool banyan style. I love the different aerial roots and how they're creating this crazy pattern. This really reminds me more of how a ficus looks in the forest. A lot of times, these trees start off as epiphytes, and they grow down from the canopy with lots of aerial roots coming down, and they really get this kind of wild aerial root structure. So the plant still has a while to go before it's a real solid bonsai. But I think it's really coming along nicely. At this point, I just want it to grow, grow, grow. I really want it to be a taller banyan style in the end. I really want the final product to be at least 2 to 3 feet tall. Really a big, wide